Hey, welcome to another week of Game Dev Weekly. I'm sorry I missed last week. I had a few things I needed to sort out for the 1.3 update, but I'm happy to announce that the 1.3 update is coming on the 15th of July. This is going to be a free major update for Hydroneer, and it's going to be packed full of some features I've been showing off over the last few weeks, but also some changes and some fixes. You guys saw in the previous episodes the new smelter and pallet items, and I wanted to jump in and explain that these two items are not the final solution to multiple purchases or kind of endgame smelting. The 1.3 update is going to be centered around the mid-game and just stretching that one out, whereas the next update, the 1.4 update, is going to be more about the endgame content. I also noticed that Hydroneer is on the Masterpiece tag on Steam, which is pretty awesome. I think some users have gone in there, pressed the little plus button next to the tags, and then selected Masterpiece, and then when you do that, it kind of boosts it up on the Masterpiece page. So thank you anyone who's done that and also left a Steam review. That stuff really does help me out. So let's jump into the first thing I got to show off this week. 1.3 is coming with a few map changes. As well as having signposts like these, I've also added in small landmarks to make it a little bit easier to travel some of these roads. They kind of all look a bit the same, so it makes it a little bit tricky. So I think these new additions will make it a lot easier. I've also got some changes in the town of Bridgeport as well. The scrapyard now has a sign that says the Panklang Brothers, and now the conveyors now have their own store as well, called the Conveyor Nation. But one of the biggest changes in 1.3 is the new Bridgeport Harbour on my left over here. As you come in here, there's some docks where you can kind of head down here. Currently there's nothing over here. I might add something here in the future. But we've got a pretty nice looking boat here. We wanted to go with something that looks pretty fantasy when it came to the boat. You can walk across to the ship using the gangplank over here. And what we have is one store over here, and then we've got the blueprints down here. So there's a few things over here. I put in the pallet just to make it easier to move things over here as the vehicle can only get to the front of these gates. So you've got your pallet over here. We've also got the workbench as well. A few screwdrivers, which is the item used with the workbench, and also just some random stuff like the mining helmet and some tool bag. Down here is the blueprint system. So the arrows show the progression of the blueprint system, and I think it lays it out quite nicely. You place the blueprint on the bench and then the item in the pot over here and press this to purchase. It's also got a little glowing shard in here, which I think looks really cool. 1.3 is also full of new quality of life features, and one of my favorites here is the one to prevent items clipping through the walls when you drop them. If you drop an item while it's clipped through the wall like this, it'll fly up in the air and you'll probably lose it forever. So this new little update stops you from dropping the item, and also plays a funny little sound effect too, which I am a massive fan of. It took myself and the sound designer Dan quite a while to figure out the right sound effect to use, but I think this one fits it really well. Speaking of sounds, Dan has also added in quite a few new sounds to the game, and I'm really happy with how they've come out. This, for example, is the new lantern dropping sound. Another quality of life addition to the game is also when you go to place items down, it now shows you the grid that it's been placing on. The grid system can be kind of confusing at the start to players, so I think this one really helps players out when they're placing items down. As there's going to be quite a lot of changes in 1.3, I've also changed the spawn rate of different items. So now gems are actually reduced by quite a bit. So as they're reduced by quite a bit, I also needed a new item that we could have on the anvil that wouldn't require any gems, just to make it really easy for you to create things with your initial gold. So what we've got here is a nice gold bracelet. It only requires one gold bar, so it's pretty easy to use, but the materials going into it would obviously give you a lesser yield than it would if you made, let's say, a ring or a necklace. So I'm going to take my hot gold bar, place it on here as usual, and create the bracelet. Another new thing that I've been working on this week is these conveyor barriers. Now they're really useful if you maybe have got large items on your conveyor belts or a lot of pressure going into the conveyor belts pushing items quite quickly, because they'll stop items falling off of the end of conveyor belts. What's really nice about these is they are just made in singles as well, so you can place just one down at a time. If you want to have an entrance right here, then I can just pull this one off and use it to drop items onto it. So now it's time for this week's competition. This theme of this week was what kind of item would you add into the game? And we got some really cool suggestions. The first one here is by Murdo97, and it's some kind of barriers for the conveyor belt that pushes everything into the middle of the belt. And I think that's a really cool idea. Actually, I already had those conveyor barriers planned for 1.3, so I think it's really cool that someone suggested something that actually ties into what I was already going to do. But yeah, it's a really cool model that he's created. I think it looks like he's created it on Blender, and I think it actually fits the aesthetic pretty well. Hydroman here has got a really cool design of a compass, and what I really like about this is it kind of fits the style of the game, but it also has that orange outline that he's kind of like photoshopped in there. And yeah, I think that's a really cool idea, you know, being able to navigate tunnels easier would be a really nice feature to add into the game. Now, this is a really cool one. Fun Socks here has got a Hydroid, as he calls it, the M4X Max series, and it's a big mech. I'm sure this thing would be very overpowered and would probably make me lose my mind just trying to put it into the game, but it does look awesome. It really reminds me of that game BioShock, and I think it looks really cool. That's it for this week's competition. Let me know your favorite entry down in the comments below. I'm going to take a break for the competition for a week or two, but let me know down in the description as well what kind of things you would like to see in the next competitions. So there's a little bit of an issue with the harvester object. This is the object where you put dirt in the top and then gems come out of the side. But as you can see, when this is placed down on the grid, the gems would come out kind of inside the conveyor belt here. What needs to happen is this exit port needs to be raised up by quite a bit, so then the gems will pour out onto the conveyor belt. Also, what I want to do is make this a bit taller as well. It doesn't quite fit one grid square. This is actually proportionately not correct. So it's something that I'm going to clean up when I look at the model again. And then because I've changed the model, I'm going to have to retexture it as well. So first up, I'm going to take it into a modeling program and then resize it. So here we are in the model editor. You can see here this is a 1x2 cube, and that is just so I can keep everything on the grid. So when we actually look at it, we need to make sure that everything is sitting just perfectly. The height that this needs to be at is just above midpoint. I think the midpoint's about here, but I'll make sure I line that one up exactly how it should be. And then what I also want to do is, you might notice here that the grid size is actually quite a bit bigger than what it is right here. So I'm going to move this entire bit straight up as well. So now the harvester is back in Unreal Engine. I did actually retexture it, but I forgot to record it, so we're just going to skip over that part and pretend it never happened. And now what I'm going to test out is I'm going to put this dirt inside the top of the harvester and make sure it comes out okay. I did make some changes to the speed of the items coming out of the harvester, so that should also be a bit nicer. I've also overhauled the entire conveyor belt system, so it's working a lot nicer now. But I haven't tested it just yet, so it might actually have some weird issues. Made a little makeshift staircase here, and here we go. Nice. Okay, cool. So it came out. Looks like I got some Cloutium as well there. But the issue was it kind of came out a bit too quick. So I think what I'll have to do is kind of slow down the speed that items come out of here, so then they hit the belt and then move along. The final thing I'm showing off today is a very large feature coming to 1.3, and it's called the David. It's a dynamic auto voxel inclusion distributor. I put out a question on Twitter trying to find what people thought of this. It basically creates these massive meatballs, as I call them. It uses shard powered technology to shoot out large clumps of dirt, which will then refill some space that was dug out, which means the David works perfectly with the Goliath. Do you see what I did, David, Goliath? Anyway, I've got a little setup here just to show you guys exactly how it works. Currently, I've got a Goliath sitting up top here, which is going to dig directly downwards, and then underneath it is a David ready to refill the ground straight up here. Now obviously the Goliath will dig a little bit deeper than this, but just for this example I'm going to keep it at this length. So I'm going to turn on the Goliath. I should also have some sort of conveyor system here to kind of move this dirt away, but it'll be fine for now. A nice new feature of 1.3 is all of the mesh components in an item are now highlighted. So you can see here now when I hover over this Goliath, I can see exactly where that drill is. Now the Goliath is finished digging, I also forgot to put in any filters, so it did break down a couple times. So I did have to make a quick run to the store and grab some tool bags, but that's okay. But what's really nice about the David down here is that it doesn't actually take any damage as well. Water pressure does increase the speed of the item, but you don't have to worry about it breaking down or anything. It's pretty simple to use. Once you've got a shard in there to power it, you just close the door and it starts working. It will then fill the entire gap back up. The David can also be rotated in any direction as well, so if you had a line of Goliaths, then you could just put one of these Davids at the bottom and fill up just that one line. They're really fun to use, and I think they're going to make an awesome addition to the automation. That's going to do it for this week. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to get these videos a little bit earlier, then consider joining my Patreon. For a minimum pledge of $2, you can get all these videos earlier than anyone else. A big thank you to my Patreons as always, and I will see you all next week.